Welcome back. And as we mentioned, President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu met today with the families of American hostages being held by Hamas. According to the White House, 8 Americans are believed to still be in Gaza, 5 of whom are believed to still be alive, including Hersh Goldberg-Polin, who was abducted from the Nova Music Festival by Hamas on October 7th and has been held hostage for 293 days now. His parents, Rachel Goldberg-Polin and Jon Polin, participated in that meeting at the White House, which just wrapped up a few minutes ago. They've been gracious enough to join me now. So please take us inside the room a little bit. How did that White House meeting go, and what did President Biden and the Prime Minister have to say?
So President Biden kicked off the meeting by talking about some of the personal experiences he's had in his life with challenge, with loss, and the urgency of putting us out of our ambiguous trauma, the uncertainty of what's going on with our loved ones, and the importance of bringing them home now. Prime Minister Netanyahu then basically continued that theme and assured us that he's doing everything he can to make it happen. And then the room opened for conversation. We all got to say what we wanted to say. We all impressed upon the leaders our gratitude for what they've done so far and our push for them to not stop until we get all of our loved ones out. And not only to get our loved ones out, which of course was the focus of the meeting, but the importance of calming the region. Everybody in the region benefits from a hostage deal that will be part of a ceasefire and that will enable the whole region to figure out how to move forward in a more peaceful way.
Did you get a substantive update on the status of those ceasefire talks? Administration officials have told us that there's been a framework agreed to, but we've heard nothing about implementation.
Well, we also were not privy to details. These are very sensitive negotiations and conversations that are going on. So, and some things that were shared with us were things that we wouldn't necessarily think are appropriate to share forward, but we're not privy to those kind of details.
Well, then let me ask it this way. Are you more confident leaving the meeting than you were going into it that a ceasefire could be near?
I want to say I'm more confident for a few reasons. I'm more confident based on the urgency that we heard in the room, the cries that we heard in the room, and the understanding of the urgency of this moment. In addition, what we also now know to be true, not necessarily from the meeting in the room, but what we know in the last day or two to be true is global pressure is increasing on all sides in a way that's more likely to lead to a productive end of this situation. And domestically in Israel, we feel like the leadership across the military and intelligence communities feel like they have gotten the negotiations to the point where they think the time is ripe. And we've heard from the parties that are representing Hamas that they believe that now the time is ripe for the Hamas side as well. So all conditions seem to be coming together. But of course, as we have said, we're not going to count our chickens or our hostages until they are home in our arms with us hugging them.
Understandable. You were also in that meeting that Netanyahu held with hostage families earlier this week. We have some reporting that basically whenever the American families pushed the prime minister on a hostage deal, his aides would call on his guests from Israel who would basically back up his insistence that the military still needs to go after Hamas. I'm curious, after this meeting, if you feel like Netanyahu is really listening to what you and the other American families have been telling him, if he's sort of really engaged with the urgency of what you're pushing for.
It certainly was what we were hearing. And I do think after the last several days here in the United States that Prime Minister Netanyahu is understanding there is a consensus, certainly from the United States and other parties as well, that now is the time. And as John said, we're hearing about the suffering not just of the 120 hostage families, but also the hundreds of thousands of Gazan civilians who are suffering horribly. Our entire region has a surplus of pain and agony, and it is quite clear to every single party involved in these negotiations that the time has come for this to end.
I want to add that what's happened this week in Washington is that President Biden, who made the bold announcement that he is going to step down, is clearly so fully committed to bringing this process over the finish line now, and he could focus on it even more than he already has been. And the two candidates for president, Vice President Harris and President Donald Trump, all three of them have been unequivocally clear this week that this must end. So if there's any party at the negotiating table who has some political calculus that there's benefit in waiting, I believe that message this week is there isn't. The deal must happen now.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there have been suggestions that Netanyahu is essentially trying to hold out until our elections are over in November in the hopes that he could get a better deal from Donald Trump if he wins. Do you think there are politics in this moment that are contributing to whether or not there's a deal?
We've actually heard twice now President Trump has issued statements saying now is the time to get this done. This needs to be over. He has been unequivocal about that. And so I think that really shuts down that argument.
What did you make of the protests that we saw all around D.C. yesterday during Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech and afterwards? How do you kind of balance, obviously, the speech that you were trying to give, the message that you're trying to put out there with what you're seeing in terms of these large-scale protests around the city here yesterday, but around the country from time to time?
Well, part of being in a democracy is that we do have the right to express what we think. And I actually think being in a true, vibrant democracy, people are allowed to say what they feel and how they understand a situation. I would say that this is a very complicated, complex, layered conflict, and that not everyone is completely aware of the nuances involved. I think there are many of these protesters who don't even realize that of the hostages being held, they represent 24 different nations. They are Muslim, they are Jewish, they are Christian, they are Buddhist, they are Hindus. We have become friendly with one of the Muslim Arab families whose loved ones are being held captive along with Hersh. And one of the family members said, why is no one advocating for our family member? There are two of them. Why is no one advocating for our Muslim Arab hostages? We've heard from some of the Thai Buddhist families. Why is no one advocating for their loved ones? There are Black Christian Africans being held hostage. You don't hear those protest voices for those people. And I think that it's simply that they are not aware that this is not a monolithic group of people being held.
I want to add even more to that.
Well, John, I'm sorry. I have to cut you off because we have completely run out of time. But I thank you so much for coming on and being willing to share your story and your family's story with us. And I wish you good luck in the advocacy that you are doing. It's so important.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.